Welcome to the Reality of Herbal Therapy podcast. So today I'm talking with Lynn because one of our daughters was really sick recently, and we just kind of wanted to share with you the experience we had with it. She came down with whatever the nasty thing is that's going around, and there's a lot of people that have been sick for like a week or two with it. So when she first got it, she took some days off from work, but the part we wanted to share with you is how things changed. So starting off with, the thing going around, sore throat, earache, what else?
Yeah, it was sore throat, earache, headache, like just no energy, tired, like beyond tired, can't function, have to sleep all day. And I think it was a bit of stomach too, like just like a nausea that makes you not really want to eat, but not a puking nausea. It's like, it was a weird, I don't know, it was weird.
So let's talk a little bit about what do we do just when that comes up.
So when something like that comes up with our family, which we've done for years and years and actually probably decades, we always treat ear, nose, throat. So for anybody who doesn't know what that means we swab the nose with something because it's part of the sinuses. It needs to be able to drain. You need to be able to breathe. That keeps you from getting a major sinus infection.
So basically we swab with Comfrey Gold Salve.
Or Gland Salve.
Gland Salve,
if you're daring, it gives like the vapor and it just kind of gets things moving. But Comfrey Gold Salve is very soothing and healing. So if your nose is raw already, Comfrey Gold Salve is perfect. But as crazy people, Gland Salve is my favorite.
Well, and I was also thinking, like, if somebody doesn't have the salves on hand and it comes on really fast.
Yeah, you can use olive oil, you can use coconut oil, you can use whatever you want. So typically to swab the nose, that's a Q-tip. You dip a Q-tip into whatever you decide to put up your nose. So like if it's Comfrey Gold Salve, I just swirl it a little in Comfrey Gold Salve. It doesn't have to be tons of it. And then you swirl it around in your nose and go as deep as you can comfortably handle. And oh my goodness, the relief it brings is just awesome. And you do that on both sides, and you can do it multiple times a day. There is no limit on that. So even if your sinuses are just dry, you can do that. It's so awesome. But then if I have little tiny kids, their nostrils are really small when I had babies or when I have grandkids over or whatever, I actually have a squeezy bottle with coconut oil in it. So I can just tip them backwards and just put a couple drops in each nostril. And sometimes that just fixes everything. So their sinuses start moving and so that they're just way happier and they can breathe better, especially like on a nursing baby. They have to be able to breathe out of their nose. So if they're not feeling well, you need to keep their nose clear. Coconut oil or even water sometimes just lubricates the sinuses.
Because when you mentioned the squeezy bottle, the water, because you always have the water, but is it just straight water?
Well, just straight water is okay, but if you can do a saline solution with with the water, it's actually really nice. So if I had about a quarter cup of water, I would put a pinch of baking soda and a pinch of good salt in it. So like pink Himalayan salt or something like that. And then shake it up and I put it in that squeezy bottle. If I have the ratio right, it doesn't burn in the nose. Even when you have dry sinuses, it doesn't burn, it soothes. One of those things kills bacteria in the nose and stuff. So it helps to keep you from getting sick actually. And then I think it's the baking soda that actually resets the pH in your nose. So then and in your sinus cavity up there, so that then everything just works as it should. Because when you're sick, usually things go acidic. So it needs to bring it back more on the alkaline side. And then you can breathe better. So those are typically the things we do for the nose. Okay. Then we treat the ears. Yeah. So the ears, there's quite a few options. The basic one is just, I put peroxide in my kids' ears, just lay them down, dump a little bit of peroxide in their ears. Usually it bubbles a lot if it's needed. Like if they have an earache and I can't even think of the words. the stuff in their ear, and the peroxide helps.
Wax and stuff like that.
Yeah, the earwax, but sometimes it could be a little yeasty or whatever, and peroxide just helps with that. But peroxide also helps to loosen up earwax. If earwax is starting to clog things and make everything not flow, it can loosen that up, so then it can actually come out of the ears and stuff. So we do peroxide first, and then we follow it by a good oil or an ear oil. So plain olive oil would work, plain coconut oil would work, but typically if it's like a olive garlic oil or mullein in it is really good. Yeah. So we just do a good.
And most health food stores would have ear oil. You just go in and ask them for ear oil, and they'll have it. It's already mixed, like a ratio of the garlic and mullein.
And it works really good. And there's all sorts of videos on YouTube or ideas on Pinterest on how to make your own if you're that kind of a person that likes to make your own concoctions of what to put in your ears. Yeah. But typically, and you can, once the oil is in, like on a little tiny kid, just getting it in and then getting him to lay there for a few seconds and dumping it out, that is better than nothing. It at least coated the ears and stuff, and it's doing good. But we like to put a little bit of cotton in the ears to hold it in there for a while, and then flip it over and do the other side. And then put cotton in that side, and you can go to sleep with it in your ears. So then it just gets to marinate a little bit longer. So it is better if it stays in. But on little tiny kids, sometimes a few seconds is all you've got. So yep. So ears, nose, and then there's the throat. So for the throat, for us, we put gland oil on the outside of the throat, because if your glands get all swollen, it affects your throat.
So, and to find your glands, you start just behind the back of your ears. And if you follow down your jawline, and then as it kind of like swoops down to the sides of your neck, that's where the glands are. And got lymphatics there also. And by putting gland oil or gland salve there, it helps to draw anything out. Sometimes our lymphatics or our glands get clogged with stuff, and that helps to move it.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And then with the throat also, that kind of comes back to the nose, because 9 times out of 10, a sore throat that gets itchy and all sorts of stuff, 9 times out of 10, it is the sinuses draining from the nasal cavities up above the throat. So when you swab your nose and get all that working, that actually can help with the sore throat. But the sore throat, we use Dr. James's cough syrup mix, and I keep that is always made in my fridge no matter what the season is, so that if somebody starts getting a tickly throat or whatever, we start using that immediately. We don't wait until we can't talk or until our throat is swollen shut to do anything. Typically, we do cough syrup right away. And then because it's ear, nose, throat, sinus thing, we take Fection and Hayaz. And since COVID happened, I always put ammonia and phlegm up in my kids' stuff, just because lungs and I don't want their lungs to get bad or anything. So that when we have allergy things, I typically have them take ammonia and a phlegm up a day, so that we're hopefully not going to get any major thing. It just keeps our lungs strong, gives the lungs the nutrients they need, besides the stuff in the sinus cavity.
Well, and like you're saying, like the sinuses fill up with, or they're, whether it's virus infection or whatever, and that everything in our upper respiratory system is connected to the lower respiratory system. And so gravity does its thing. And if it moves down, you want to make sure you're taking care of both parts.
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of catch it ahead of time. And so if we have kind of a raspy chest thing going on with that, or breathing, whatever, we love Dr. James's analgesic. It's kind of like Vicks Vapor Rub. We just rub it on our chest a little, and then we can breathe that in, and it helps to open up sinuses, open up things. But by having it on the chest, it also helps with the lungs. At least for me, it helps with how my lungs feel. Now, if somebody has a little tiny baby or toddlers, and they don't necessarily want to have it up on their chest, you put it on the bottom of their feet and put socks on them. And somehow, I can't remember all the details Dr. James taught me about how that works and why, somehow that works miracles on little people. It may even work on adults. I've only done it on children, but you just put one swipe on their foot, rub it around a little, put their socks on them, and it helps with their sinuses and breathing and everything. So yeah, so we typically do that and then drink lots and lots of water. Like it's when the sinus stuff is happening. And then for my family, we have a little bit of not necessarily a reaction to dairy, but when we're having sinus issues and congestion and all of that, we get better way faster if we back off on dairy, especially any processed dairy. So cheese, sour cream, cottage cheese, even normal store-bought milk. If I have a raw milk supplier, we can still use a little bit of that and be okay. But when we're really sick, we even back off on just all dairy. We back off and sugar, and it helps them to get better a lot faster because those kinds of things help to keep you congested more. So typically that's what we do. So our daughter this week, though, that was sick, she lives away from home. So she was doctoring herself according to her memory and the people around her, what she needed to do and stuff. She was sleeping a lot, which was great and everything. Well, then I get a call one day. She doesn't live very far from us, but I get a call from my sister that she's living with, and she says, her face is all swollen and her neck is swollen. Like you can't hardly tell where her face begins because everything is so swollen, and it had just come on. They hadn't noticed it beforehand. So she'd already been sick for probably 4 or 5 days. And then all of a sudden, like she's had a sore throat. She hadn't eaten for a few days because she felt nauseous, but also because her throat hurt and it was hard to swallow and whatever. And they said they'd been trying to do all the things we do, but I don't know for sure what they were doing. So I went over to help because they were very concerned. They're like, what do we do? And stuff. So I go over to help, and holy cow, her face was really like her neck was completely swollen. It did not look good, but it didn't have a fever. That's typically something I check first. If something has a fever, that's a very dangerous. Deal with that fast. Whatever's going on is definitely an issue. And at a severe level, it didn't have a fever. So I put my hand on it. It's not hot. It wasn't even warm beyond what anywhere else on her body would have been. And she didn't have a fever at that time. So that was the first check, because that's a really not good sign if it does. So then I asked her to open her mouth. She couldn't open her mouth far enough for me to see into her mouth very much of what might be going on, but her tongue looked funny. So she had like a white film on her tongue with kind of red splotchy spots. And I don't know if that's just because she wasn't able to eat or what. It was interesting. And then she said, it feels kind of like maybe I have a lump at the back of my mouth at the beginning of my throat. So we started talking about that. We made sure we treated her for all the throat stuff, all the, the ear, nose, throat, sinuses. We even did some ear candles on her and stuff, but nothing would make it feel any better. So then I started asking her, okay, this little lump thing you're feeling, does it move? Basically, I was wondering if she had an abscess of some kind. She had no teeth that hurt. She hadn't had any problems with her teeth for a while. She just said there's this little lump back there, and I didn't think anything of that. So we just kept doctoring her all night long. Slept on the couch to make sure she kept breathing through the night because it was getting increasingly difficult to breathe and stuff. And we kept treating everything. And I was dumbfounded that nothing was working. None of our typical anything, because like we've had it before where a kid's throat tried to swell shut with allergies or sinus or whatever was going on. And we were able to give them sage tea, and instantly it helps to open up the throat and open up things. We've done anti-spaz because it gets you to gasp for air and
it instantly opens everything up also.
Yeah, it instantly opens things up and gets things to move and everything's good. We tried all of those things. We tried everything I have in my toolbox to be able to take care of it. So then I called a couple people to find out, okay, do you have any ideas what this might be? And we thought maybe thrush, which I thought typically was a baby thing. So like that's kind of like fungus in your mouth, kind of like not fungus. Is fungus the right word? Yeah, kind of like candida in the mouth, but then that ends up in your stomach. And typically with a child, they end up with a rash also because it goes through the entire digestive tract. So we thought maybe. So we got red raspberry leaf tea for her to do that, to try that and see if that would do some soothing, because that typically on a baby starts working immediately. That didn't do anything at all. And then we thought, like the thought crossed through my mind, strep. And I've never straight up dealt with strep. So I just figured it's sinus. We'll just treat it the same as everything else. Well, by the next morning, she still wasn't doing good. We actually ended up taking her to the emergency room because everything we tried was not working. I think what we were doing was keeping it from getting any worse. Nothing got any worse and she could still breathe, but barely, and she couldn't talk. I mean, her voice turned into a mouse voice and stuff. So we finally decided to take her to the emergency room. And that was actually pretty awesome. It was a crazy thing. That's part of why we're sharing this today, because nobody I've talked to has heard of what she was having an issue with. So they asked her all these questions. They did the same things. They asked the same things I had asked. Do you have any teeth issues? Might this be an abscess? Have you had just all the sinus things? What are your symptoms? How long have you had this? Just all sorts of stuff. And then the doctor looks in her mouth and he said, it was kind of weird. It is a tonsil abscess. So at the back of her throat on I think it's the right-hand side, one of her tonsils had abscessed into her throat. And that's why the entire side of her face, so on the right-hand side, was way more swollen than the left. I think the left was just an overcarry of what was on the right. So it was a tonsil abscess, and they had to drain it. And then they were going to have to give her antibiotics to be able to get rid of it. But they said that typically a tonsil abscess starts with strep. So then they tested her for strep and she had strep, and we didn't realize that she had strep. That would have been nice to catch days and days before and know that that's what it was. Yeah. So they had to stick a nasty needle with a syringe in the back of her throat. And they actually popped it and sucked out as much as they could into that syringe. Oh my goodness. That was so nasty. So gross. Looked so awful. But immediately she felt the pressure kind of release, and she was still in pain. And oh my goodness, she had to spit and spit and spit because it just kept draining and draining and draining. And the doctor said she would need to do that. So, but by the time evening came, she was actually okay enough that she thought she would be able to sleep and not be terrified that she'd wake up not breathing. So even after all that we could do herbally, which we've been doing it for decades, and this is her first time in a hospital. And I've never had to take anybody into a hospital except for broken bones and stuff like that. So it was a new experience for me, but it was wonderful that they were able to see and know what to do for it. I was glad they didn't have to take her tonsils out, and she couldn't have opened her mouth wide enough for that anyways.
Yeah.
And stuff. But the power of that. So with that, she needed to be on antibiotics. So I guess since we're talking to people, if you end up on antibiotics, make sure that you take things to keep your bowels moving and your body functioning properly in that manner, because antibiotics typically constipate people, and those chemicals and what's making you sick, like strep and all of that, can't move out of your body if your bowels and those things are not functioning well. So typically yogurt, we use Clean Lax.
Lots of fection.
Yeah. And fection helps with from the abscess, but that also helps with strep.
Yeah.
Because it has to build back up your immune system, and you need to build up your immune system from taking all those antibiotics also. Antibiotics are really, really rough on the body. Now, really crazy people that I've talked to, they will get something lanced like that, and then they don't do the antibiotics. They just take fection. So, but that's you and your doctor discuss that. That's not just something you take lightly, because you do not want to get so sick that strep takes your life.
Yeah. Or for it to come back
or for it to come back or whatever. So that's for me, a prayerful decision, but sometimes we just do the take that antibiotic, which I'm glad I have never had to do that. But for my daughter, she's going to take that, and then we'll help to get her digestive tract back in order after she gets past that. And we had learned years and years ago, once you start taking that antibiotic, the doctors say, take it every this many hours for this many days. And it's very, very important that you do that. Don't take the first dose if you don't plan on following it through and going all the way to the 10 days, because that creates issues in your system. You must take the entire, it really makes a difference to take the entire protocol for the 10 days or whatever it is that they say you need to take to be able to do that.
Awesome. So real quick before we end, because our daughter, while she was here at our house, was carrying around like 6 or 8 cups of stuff. So there was water, of course.
Yeah.
To keep the water going, but because she couldn't eat, couldn't swallow, what else were you giving her?
We were giving her tea honey. Actually, there's a recipe on the website for it. We swear by the stuff. I have a brother that calls it Hulk juice. It's his Gatorade of choice and way better for you than Gatorade. It's a mixture of vinegar and honey in water. I have a friend that when I told her about tea honey, she was like, oh, wait, we do drink that, but only as medicine, and we do it hot when allergy season and sore throat season comes around. So you can do it like a hot cider, and some people like to even add cayenne to it and stuff. So yeah, we can put a link down in the notes for this for tea honey, but that keeps a body hydrated and it gives your body vitamins and nutrients that you need, vital vitamins and nutrients, because one of the biggest things that people get in the hospital for with allergy and flu symptoms and everything is dehydration and malnutrition. So if you're too sick to do anything else, you do tea honey, and that keeps your system alive enough and well enough on the inside to survive through that and not end up in the hospital on IVs with. So I'm just glad we didn't have that on top of everything else to deal with, because she had been drinking tea honey. And I add like 5 drops of iodine to it. That seems to help with throat stuff, besides keeping your body up in the nutrients of iodine, because your body needs so much of that to process so many things. And so we do iodine and then some kind of, and helps with viruses and everything. So, and then we typically do something kind of like emergency. There's all sorts of different brands of emergency type powders, vitamin C powder, things you can put in your drinks. Typically we make a cocktail of the tea honey. We put the emergency in it and iodine in it and have my kids drink it. Now there's some of my kids that do not like it at all, and it is medicine for them and I have to make them drink it. And there's others that drink it all summer and all year and absolutely love it. Some of them like it warm, some of them like it cold, but it keeps you from ending up in the hospital dehydrated. So
was it just water and tea honey? Because there was other things. So like the teas, we had sage and mullein tea.
Oh, yeah. So we did give her sage mullein tea. The sage helps to bring down swelling in the throat. Mullein is absolutely amazing. I remember when I was little, when Dr. James was still seeing clients in a milk truck. So he would drive around to people's houses and see them, and he would take us camping, and we would go out into the mountains of New Mexico and we gathered mullein. Because at that time he had individual herbs and he would make people teas for all of their needs. There was no capsules. There was no formulas. There was no anything. So we went and harvested mullein, and that takes gloves and you don't want to be itchy and stuff, but it is absolutely amazing for the throat. It's just absolutely a miracle. So if you're ever out camping and you start getting a sore throat and don't have anything on you, if you know what mullein is, you make a mullein tea, and it is pretty amazing. So she had a mullein sage tea because that was what we know can help with swelling in the throat, but it wasn't working. But it probably still helped with the strep part of it. It just didn't help with the abscess part. And then we also, her other tea, so she had a red raspberry leaf tea that we were doing. That was in case it was thrush. So that was there. And then because of the nutrient problem we knew because she hadn't eaten for days. We were giving her slippery elm drink, and she wasn't able to get much of that one down for some reason, and the abscess and the swallowing may have been, but we can put the slippery elm drink link down there because that is major nutrients. So if people can't get anything down, or if they have a stomach thing tied to whatever is making them sick, it actually soothes the stomach lining and soothes the throat. Slippery elm is good for the throat as far as the sore throat, but it's good for the stomach as far as the stomach ache. It just has this soothing nature, and it latches on to things and helps to pull things out that are making you sick. So the slippery elm drink is absolutely amazing. It's a mix of, like, we like to do ours with a nut milk. So we make ours, we put a little bit of nuts in the blender, like cashews in the blender, and water. So we make our nut milk first. And then we add a little bit of slippery elm and some cinnamon, some nutmeg if we have it, some honey, because honey is very soothing and just really good for healing things. And then it has a raw egg in it. So we put hot water into it. So it's a hot mix already, have the blender running, and then drop an egg in from the top while the blender's running. And it just makes it an emulsified, it just mixes in there. And then we put a tablespoon of coconut oil in it because that's nutrient dense. Also helps to keep your blood sugar up, even if you can't eat. It works really, really well to give slippery elm drink to elderly people that are having a hard time holding things down and stuff. And it's way better for you than Ensure or any of those other bottled protein drink things. It's really good for you. So those were the things we did. And I think she had done that for a few days. She had been doing slippery elm drink also. And those are the things that kept her nutrients up and stuff, even though she could not swallow much of anything. We also at some point had made her a smoothie, and she could only drink a few tablespoons of it because of the way her stomach was feeling and her throat and whatever. But even a few tablespoons was enough to keep her from being admitted to the hospital for dehydration or malnutrition, which typically comes with an extended illness.
Yeah. So along the lines of the raw egg, if you're really concerned about the raw egg, you can basically boil some water and put the raw egg in there for put your egg whole, like you're going to do a hard boiled egg, but only do it for 10 seconds. Basically that will kill any, bugs or whatever bacteria that you might feel is in your egg. That will, so if you're really concerned about the raw egg in the slippery elm drink, a lot of people are okay with it, but if you're concerned about that, then
well, with mine, typically I have just put boiling water in.
And that does about the same thing.
So I put boiling water in the blender. So then by the time I drop that egg in there, but seriously, if your blender is not running and you do that, you are going to have scrambled egg smoothie. It is gross. It is really, really disgusting. So make sure the blender's running when you put the egg in, or do what you said, that method to sterilize your egg if you're concerned.
Yep.
So
great. I appreciate you talking with me today. If you guys have questions, let it, and we'll talk to you next time. It is not the intent of professional herbal instruction or any persons associated therewith to diagnose or prescribe. The intent is only to offer herbal information for your consideration. In the event you use this information without your doctor's approval, you are prescribing for yourself, which is your God-given right. But professional herbal instruction or any persons associated herewith assume no responsibility. The claims and statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.